And that's what a super high dielectric does. It simply steers the waves of charge into pine cones kissing noses. So when the waves of charge get steered into that magic, well, you say, that sounds, why would we like to know that? Well, do you know what the bottom of Nostradamus' scrying cup was coated with? Phase conjugate dielectric. Oh, yeah. Do you know what that Shoat Stone crystal that John Dee and Kelly did the scrying to see the angels and the alphabet and Ophanim and Enochian? You know what that is? A phase conjugate dielectric. Do you know what that Lucifer's Eye glass gold-doped meteor, which became the Kaaba stone, ground up, and how John Dee and Kelly turned that into the Philosopher's Stone and made the gold the purest gold ever measured by the British Royal Society? You know what that is? It's a phase conjugate dielectric. You know why that red glass in the stained glass window at Chartres, made by the Templars, how they made the infinite potential fractal layering in that glass like the perfect infinite sandwich phyllo dough? You know how they made it? The same way that glass meteor made the Kaaba stone, which became the alchemist's Philosopher's Stone, did. They vaporized gold vapor through the molten glass at the right instant, so the foam geometry of the glass was self-similar, fractal, to the electrical geometry of the radii of the gold atom. And do you know what the gold atom radii look like precisely? A completed SPDF subshell, and the DNF subshell, dodecaecosa. So this is literally the electron radii of what makes gold stable and noble. Dodecaecosa stellation. We can go to the chemistry lesson later. But I'm just saying that if you understood what a phase conjugate mirror, phase conjugate dielectric is, man, can you teach esoteric history. You can have a lot of fun. You get to run around the world, talk fast, whatever. So, getting back to the principle then, imagine the scrying stone that John Dee and Kelly were using. It's called the Shoat Stone. They said that Ophanim Enochian angel handed that stone to them, and in it, Kelly, who is rather clairvoyant, like many people who use the Theraphi get more clairvoyant, and he could see this angel alphabet, and we're going to talk more about it later, but it's a flame letter series called hypercube, which is a superposed cube making dodeca again. So basically, they're seeing shadows of plasma. And the index to the symmetry of the plasma shadows is sacred alphabet. It is angel language. It is ability to communicate. It is said that the angels only communicate in the pure angles of charge. Well, what that means is their bodies are made of those spin donuts. And if you know how to index them, you can talk to them. Remember that the angels, angels and the elementals consider us drunk because we don't talk to them. It's an old story. The elemental forces know that we will always have tornadoes and elemental forces that are in chaos until we communicate with the elemental forces. Elemental forces are the plasma beings, just like the Theraphi plasma cloud is a plasma being. Carlos was saying about when they took down the Theraphi there in... what did you say when you took down the Theraphi from your office and you were taking it down? It was like you were losing a pet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was like it was a...
Yeah, it was a feeling of sadness, of farewell, yeah.
Yeah, like you were losing a family friend. Yeah,
oh,
yeah. And I think Kati was saying too that the Theraphi plasma is like a pet puppy dog. Mm-hmm. It would like to be steered around and it wants to be petted, but it's rather fussy about its electrical environment. And plasma balls are like that. You know, ball lightning, we've said many times, is famous for responding to telepathy. Why? At the center of that vortex, there's a conjugate point, and there's a place where the waves commune with... This is my new bumper sticker for the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is so cool. So, my new bumper sticker for the day says, "May the Planck be with you." And this Planck length is the point of charge communion. You know, this is where the force becomes with you. So by phase locking everything to that precise music, you enter into DNA radio. So that's the communion of point of charge, and that is literally the communion of saints. That's the beginning of the collective unconscious. Embedding in that with longitudinals is really what we started this PowerPoint keynote to be about. So that gives us our excuse to go back to our show. So I wanted to try to explain. So remember, we're just beginning here. We said inductive doesn't go as far or as fast. The dielectric, which is how radio works and DNA radio works, has more of a chance of being longitudinal. And that's what we're about to talk about. But first, let's talk about why they get to be fast. Why they get to be faster than the speed of light. First of all, my theory of gravity says that longitudinal waves are gravity, and that charge that has gone through the center of the Planck length by Golden ratio will be accelerated by Golden ratio through the speed of light. So my theory of gravity, to prove it correct, requires that when we measure waves faster than the speed of light, the majority must be at Golden ratio multiples times c, the speed of light. And the preliminary measurements are very clear. Raymond Chow is the most famous physicist on the planet measuring velocities faster than light, and he has concluded that the majority of those measures are 2.5 to 2.7 times the speed of light. Very close to 2.618 times the speed of light, which makes me real happy because it's cooking. I remember I was actually with Guy Oblinsky, who's doing Lakowski these days, when we were measuring faster than light wave propagation in optical fiber on our programmable scopes back in the cyclotronics days. But anyway, what we want to know here is what allows the waves to go so fast. What proves that Einstein screwed up when he said the speed of light was the speed limit? He didn't get that right. Oops. It is a speed threshold, but that speed threshold you can pass if you allow the Planck to be with you. So the reason they can go so fast is because when the waves, first of all, the wave geometry can only lock in to something like this dodecaecosa, because this is the only way that allows Golden ratio interference. So that's why this is the geometry of DNA, Earth grid, zodiac, and the universe, and we're going to look at some magazines that conclude the universe is also dodeca, as is the Earth grid. So the waves lock into this geometry, and then, because they're locked into this geometry, it's like the old billiard balls that touch. When you lift up this ball and drop it, if these balls are all touching each other, the ball at the other end, even if it was 1,000,000 miles away, one billiard ball would pop off almost instantly, 1,000,000 miles down the road, if they're touching each other. But suppose now you made these billiard balls all 1 millimeter apart, and you drop one here. You'd wait for a lifetime before one popped off the other end. Okay. So when they're perfectly touching, which is to say, none of them had to move. You see that? When they're perfectly touching, and you drop one here and one pops off at the other end, if they're perfectly touching, then you can go 1,000,000 miles down the road and just one will pop off potentially faster than the speed of light. But if you start spacing these things out so they're not perfectly touching, it takes forever for that bounce to reach the end of the road. So because there is perfect stillness, because there was perfect stillness, it allowed charge to be distributed. So every billiard ball that got locked like ice into this array, perfectly still, not having to move. Now, when you touch one billiard ball at one end, all the billiard balls in the entire array feel it without having to move. So zero power was invested in that distribution. So in other words, if I drop this ball and these balls have to move not at all, then 1,000,000 balls down the row one can bounce off immediately. But if these balls are spaced out and they're not perfectly still, then it's going to take a lot of power to get a bounce all the way down. So it's the stillness that allows all the billiard balls to feel each other with no power required to distribute that information. That's called embed or die. So the process of embedding into this geometry then leads us to our next conversation. Embedding. Does embedding mean anything to us? Here, I'll give you the example of embedding. There's Dave. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that, in 2001. And then he gets to the 2010, and he finally gets to the monolith on Jupiter, and he sees this great monolith from the distance that the whole movie's about getting to the monolith. And finally, Dave gets closer and closer, and he says, "Why, there's 1,000,000 of them in here." And the next thing you know, Dave has been sucked down in, and he's embedded in the fractal crystal. And then it turns out that Dave can show up at anybody's TV set anywhere that he wants, anytime. He's a well-distributed electron. So the principle is, in order for the physics to work that says there's only one electron, it just gets around, in order for that to work good, requires this perfect fractal embedding. Another context for embedding is if a lady is sewing a beautiful thatchwork quilt pattern, there are certain patterns on the quilt that can be nicely embedded in there, but there'd be other patterns that just wouldn't fit, and you couldn't embed them or nest them. So this process of perfect embedding means simply, how can the short wave inhabit the long wave without getting hurt? And that's how you exist in the mind of God. And that's what fractality is. So this relationship of embeddability leads us to our conversation about how longitudinal waves are constructed. This is a multiply connected topology and soundtrack.
Choosing compassion carefully aligns the magnetic field donuts around the heart so that nest dodeca.
Using my new toys. So these animations, you've seen these animations before. This is what happens if you take the golden spiral from the side view to the top view and rotate it. So here's the golden spiral from the side view called the perfect Valentine. And here's the top view, or the side view, which is the perfect caduceus. And when you rotate that, you see you have the Grail cup. It's the cup within the cup. You've seen these before. And this I did for the digital artists here. I started with an equation for the golden spiral, and then I superposed that topologically on the perfect 60-degree cone of invested dodecacosa, and then I rotated that spiral, and then I revolved it in 3D and color coded. So that was done with Macromine Director Super 3D, and those were the old days. And here I just superposed on the same path, see the double cone here, pine cones kissing noses, the concentric toroidal donut magnetic field toroids nested by golden ratio. So that's just an animation of the 3D implosion, pine cone kissing noses, infinite dodecacosa story, basically. And we're looking at these animations, which are fun and old, and I'm really happy to see them on our new sexy projector toy here in high res. But when we're talking about embedding, you see this is how embedding started. So this little wave here, that's the little one, the red one, and that's the flame in the mind there. And this is the nested dodecacosa, and that's the spin. So this is what a super high dielectric is doing, basically. And here is that same angle of those things. That's the imploder cones right there. That's the equation I used to make the vortex right there. And you see what it does. And this is demonstrating scale invariance, which is to say it really sucks. When you sucked out the air from that soap bubble, it changed scale without changing ratio. And that's called scale invariance or non-destructive compression. It's an introduction to alchemy, the physics of fusion, non-destructive charge collapse. The point here is this particular dodeca spin path to center is particularly ideal. See how that's changing scale without changing ratio? That's non-destructive charge collapse. If you could do that at depth, and here's just the other side view. You see, the caduceus from the side view and the top view is just the golden brown. Anyway, we're watching these animations because in the next step, we need to visualize why phase conjugation, which is simply these pine cones, why does that create longitudinal waves? That's what the next step in this series should be about, if we're clever enough. Yeah, this is what we talked about before, magnetic versus capacitive dielectric. The trees talk better. We did that slide, we did this slide. We need the longitudinal versus transverse. This is the part of the conversation. This part of the conversation is to help you really feel what somebody says when they talk about longitudinal electromagnetics. This is, remember, Tom Bearden devoted half his life to saying, you got to understand longitudinals, you don't get nothing. Eric Dollar, the same thing. These are very important. And remember that people who talk about scalar and torsional waves, the ones who know something, know that the correct term is longitudinal EMF. And if you want psychoactivity, if you want fusion, if you want to act on the nucleus, if you want to act on biology, you're going to need the longitudinal compressional wave, not just the transverse up and down. So we need to have the conversation of visualizing what makes longitudinal waves. And that visualization should be fun, in theory. Do I have that visualization handy? See if the kid, oh, look, I do. Cool.
Your water bottle's in front of you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. That is longitudinal, and this is transverse. Okay, very simple. You can see. Transverse electromagnetics. Transverse electromagnetics are like this, whereas longitudinal waves are like this, compressional. So sound waves go like that, compressional waves. But all of our electromagnetics, your radio, everything that your Wi-Fi, all this stuff, is using the transverse component and not the longitudinal. Because longitudinal electromagnetics is harder to make unless you understand phase conjugation. It used to be that they only would let the military talk about this, and even then only in Russia. But here, this is the point. In addition to the only way to be, get through radar without vision and hide stuff, it's also the only way to get through death. So I think we ought to know. So now the next question is, now that you're clear the difference between a longitudinal electromagnetic, that picture, versus a transverse electromagnetic, that picture, the next question is, how do you make a wave that's going up and down, transverse electromagnetic, suddenly start going compressional, longitudinal? That's the question on the table. We need to understand that for ourselves, because after this slide is all about, well, this is how you communicate between graveyards, and this is how you communicate with death, and this is how you heal people. So really understanding and if you want your Theraphi to do better at remote healing, you place it at a cross line, so the longitudinal wave can get to here to there. The person receiving the healing and sending the healing, if they're both at the cross point for longitudinal embedding, much better chance of remote healing, etc. And Banked is very good at that. So we're really wanting to understand longitudinal production. Yeah, I have an even cool toy here to play with this. So I took this fun equation for 5 spirals of the golden mean on the perfect 60-degree cone, which is the implosion angle of hydrogen and stellate dodeca out of the star mother, and I made the perfect vortex, which I call Schauberger's dream, which is central to the imploder.com, the super imploder and the vortex nozzle, and a lot of stuff we're doing, and Peter's working. And this, when the water is conductive or piezo, the capacitance around the nozzle is such that not only does water get energized and heal and grow plants faster, but a seed germinating next to this thing is going to grow faster even without getting this water. That's called a bioactivefield.com. And it's centripetal, okay? So this is just, remember, the next, after this, the late afternoon is supposed to be practical examples of negentropy. Theimploder.com, agriculture, that sort. So, at this moment, however, our challenge was to understand how to make a wave go from transverse on the top to longitudinal on the bottom. And we want to visualize that for ourselves because it's so cool when you get to be longitudinal. You can go faster than light. You can go through most anything. And on the day when they repeatedly measured Ingo Swann burning a thermistor at a distance with his mind through a Faraday cage, we now know how he did it. Hint. And the frequency signature in the brain waves that does it, Patrick is going to show you how to do it on Monday. It's called aflameinmind.com. So, if you understand longitudinals, you can all do all the magic stuff. And that's where you get the good paying jobs. No, I mean where you get to have the whole fun. So, the reason phase conjugation is the way to make longitudinals is here. The transverse wave comes in like this, right? It's going up and down. It's really remote, but it's basically this. Okay, here's transverse, okay? Now, how am I going to change this energy to this energy? Okay? There's a path. It's the yellow brick road to Oz. No, there's a path. If you put the golden spiral on a cone, and you're in a hydrodynamics physics class, wave mechanics, they call it optimized translation of vorticity. In spiritual science, that's called make the L and phase shift to the next dimension. This is the L right here. This is the phase shift. That to be an Elohim, the real Elohim, not just the wannabes, the ones who could actually lucid dream. You need to know this trick. So the wave that's going up and down as it enters here, think of it as rotation like this. Okay, it's up and down. Now, as it enters this spiral, let's see, we'll think of it going this way because the spirals go down this way. When it goes down this spiral, notice what's happening to the inertia of that wave. This is the important thing. It's conserved inertia that gets your memories through birth and death, for sure. It's conserved inertia that can take your eyeball through the heart of the sun. And that is the only way out of here, for sure. It is the only way to grow up. It's not escapism. It's the only way out of kindergarten. So, the inertia is going this way, and as it traverses down this optimized translation of vorticity, what's happening to the inertia? Can you see? The inertia that was going up and down, and rotating like this, is coming down the cone, and as it comes down the cone, the up and down inertia has been translated to inertia like this. You see that? Very simple. It's not even complicated when you understand. It's not a magic trick. No, it's the laws of symmetry. God is the laws of symmetry. Any physicist knows that. So, when the laws of symmetry, called phase conjugation, or pine cones kissing noses, do it right, and this is half of Bearden's life, talking about phase conjugate healing, phase conjugate weapons, and all this stuff. This is the trick. So the charge wave that was going up and down is now going compressional, longitudinal, like a sound wave. And when you get longitudinal waves going like that, magnetically, oh, you can do such cool stuff. I mean, okay, they've built the first phase conjugate microwave antenna. Well, let's say it happened in Australia. And you interfere that longitudinal microwave at a distance, which is the solution to radar hiding. Oh, well, yes, we were going to do plasma containment, like Ingo Swann did. Oops, but the military jets showed up. Stories, lots of stories. It's really fun stories. But, the military applications, well, it's childish, frankly. It is. And the fact that they only let the military know is a bit of a catastrophe. The story was that the German scientists who knew about rocketry, paperclip brought them to the USA, but the German scientists who knew about phase conjugation, how thick the paint had to be on the periscope antenna to bounce off the radar, called phase conjugation. And by the way, it's a boundary condition effect. It is the thickness of the paint. Oops, I just released a military secret. Those German scientists, they went to Russia. So in Russia, they teach phase conjugation all the time. But in America? But Tom Bearden worked on that. Anyway, that's just the side note. What you want to do is walk home with empowerment based on knowledge of the wave mechanics. And that's what this section is about. So once you have achieved a longitudinal wave, what we do know is a longitudinal electromagnetic wave can pass through just about anything. Remember, Ingo Swann, he lit that flame with his mind at a distance. It was a Faraday cage, man. No electromagnetics known except longitudinal could get through there. And when the Tibetan Bonpo, the origin of our term bonfire, prove that they're an initiate, they must light a flame with their mind. And I watched the Cherokee initiation ceremony test with Hani Wahu there at Sunray Meditation in the Arboretum where I was teaching with the Cherokee shaman. And their training was identical. Until you could light a flame with your mind, you were not an initiate. You were not a shaman. That's how our new app that we're launching today, or shortly with Patrick, came to be called flameinmind.com. Because literally this charge forms a centripetal flame that steers tornadoes and makes longitudinal waves. The longitudinal waves, the magic is, now we're having fun. We got this far. Now you know the trick to making longitudinal. Now, I'm going to teach you the trick of action at a distance. The biggest mystery in all of physics, action at a distance. Biggest mystery, how did Ingo Swann heat that thing at a distance? The biggest mystery, how does Theraphi, Bank does it quite often, and we have pictures from Eddie Sharpless in California. They had the Theraphi, they lined up carefully in the magnetic line. I don't know how many 100 miles away that horse was, but did you see the picture of the tumor that came out of that horse? Mm-hmm. And every time they turned on the Theraphi with the horse at a distance, focused on it through the psychotron, the witness, a little bit of the hair and fingernail. Every time that horse would just sit right still, head down, felt it, and immediately the horse knew what was going on. And the tumor that came out of the horse was huge. We have pictures. Ask Eddie Sharpless in Northern Cal. So, how did that work? There's action at a distance. We need to know the physics. Because if we understand the physics, we can do it better. Why did the ancestors go to so much trouble to put every single powerful electromagnetic dolmen pyramid on a dodeca-ecosa grid node? I mean, you got 100 Discovery Channel documentaries about the dodeca-ecosa grid node. It's not even news anymore. But nobody ever asked the question why. Because that's where you can embed on the longitudinal wave mechanics. That's the point. And there's actually, I'm getting to the slide here in the slideshow. That's where the cozy rev mirror is the next thing we're supposed to talk about here. Let's see if we can do that. Fractal complication. Yeah, faster than light, faster than light. Magnetics work. Okay. Prime example of the cozy rev mirror. Earth grid. Yeah. So, if you want to put a cathedral down, plunk, they call it the Cistercian cathedrals. Why do they call it Cistercian? Because it's over the cistern. What is the cistern? The place where the magnetic lines cross. Which is how the Dowser calls that a blind spring, or a Jed, as in Jedi. Or how do you cite the location of a labyrinth? We have the advanced geobiology schools. They're all clear on how you start your labyrinth. We had a lot of fun at Kudai's. How many years ago, Kudai, was that?
8 years ago.
We were young, right?
Yeah.
I think we were young. Yeah, we were. Oh, God.
2004?
Is that about right? We were walking on her front yard. We said, we're going to need a labyrinth over here. We're looking for the magnetic lines to cross. Yeah. And we found it. It was right in her front yard. It was a beautiful cross. We put a labyrinth in there, and so many people got my hair standing up, just remembering how.
To this day.
To this day. Yeah, people walk that labyrinth and they get turned inside out, they implode. But step number 1, find where the magnetic lines cross. Why? Because the natives' ancestors, Shelley's ancestors knew, they called it the 4 directions. In physics, they call it 4-wave mixing. But that's where the pine cones kisses noses, and that's what allows the transverse waves to embed in the longitudinal wave. And the longitudinal wave, electromagnetically, is DNA radio, mitogenic radiation, the collective unconscious, the communion of saints, ancestral memories. How many names do we have for the same thing? The Akashic records. If you want to make phone calls to your ancestors, Karakov got very clear about where you go electrically to enable. The air needs to be fractal. We'll show you the measurements. Embed in longitudinal. So this is why it's so important. And a couple other wonderful examples, and I think we even have the pictures here. We have our Agnihotra pictures. So why does Agnihotra, you have a pyramid-shaped copper or gold, which is a phase conjugator dielectrically, one above and one below if you're really doing advanced Agnihotra. And then you burn the plasma flame, very much like Theraphi, highly organic material, and you do it precisely at sunrise and sunset. Why? I wasn't really convinced. I was a skeptic, you know, and there we were in Poland. Was that with Valerie, remember? Valerie? Yeah. We were in Poland, and there was this farm where they teach Agnihotra. And we came to that farm, and it was like Garden of Eden. Those things were blossoming, plants, and every farm around there looked like a desert. Really, this place was just incredible. But they had buried an underground copper pyramid, which is phase-counted dielectric, and they were doing this Agnihotra religiously, sunrise and sunset. And I wasn't a believer until he had consulted his computer program for the day, and he got the minute and the second, the exact angle of sunset to light that plasma flame. And I was sitting there, and I just about melted. The wave that came through me was like, and if you do it regularly, you can feel that. And what is that? That is a conjugate angle, sunrise, sunset, right? It's perfect four-wave mixing. That's where you embed in the longitudinal. That's why Agnihotra works. It generates that fertility centripetal force. Many examples. A final example we'll use here. I was in Belgium teaching Flower of Life, actually, many years ago. And they brought over this Cozy Rev mirror. Do you know what that, you guys know what a Cozy Rev mirror is? There's a famous Russian scientist, Cozy Rev, who discovered all kinds of cool stuff. He's a fun dude. And the Cozy Rev mirror is a metal cylinder, kind of big, and it has a very precise microwave frequency. And Korotkov documented, you place these things here and over there, at maybe 1 to 4,000 miles apart. If you do it right, and one guy sitting here, one guy sitting in the one over there, you get military quality telepathy every time. I mean, this is not woo-woo, new age, whatever. No, this is the military testing to see if the telepathy works. And this was high quality telepathy. So, what was the steps to install the Cozy Rev mirror? Oh, I was out in the yard with them in Belgium watching, you know what they did? They took a Gauss, milligauss, nanogauss, low magnetic flux density magnetometer, and they're walking around the yard very rigorously. This was dowsing 101 for physicists, right? And, oh, here's a magnetic line, and then we got the cross point. Okay, plunk, right here. Same physics. So whether it's the military or God, they all do it the same way. They use physics. So these are examples. And why was there such high quality telepathy available? For the same reason that the phone calls to ancestors work so good, where Professor Korotkov followed the Kogi to where they made their ancestor phone calls and measured the fractality of the air. Because the charge distribution efficiency enables a DNA radio to work. And your DNA, of course, is a whole big cascade chain